Hello and welcome to Two Girls in a Pot. I'm Sharon.
I'm Christy.
So happy you guys are joining us. And we're really thrilled today because we have a guest on.
Yes, we are so excited to welcome Lori Pappas, an author and entrepreneur, humanitarian, known for inspiring life story and writings. Her book, The Magic of Yes, Embrace the Wise Woman Within, is a captivating guide that helps women tap into their power and resilience. Thank you and welcome to Two Girls in a Pod.
I'm so happy to be here.
You've got quite the story.
I do. I have
Journey.
a story.
So in that journey from, where you started kind of to where you are now, what have been those things for you that kind of just really stick out and you sit there and say, I really think this is something that can be maybe a helpful thing for other people?
Well, I think it really is several things. First of all, it really is understanding who you are, really knowing what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are good things, what are bad things, what can you do with what you have, and how can you make that better? And that has really served me well. I think one of the most important lessons really is hey, we're born with this. I talk about it being like a set of cards. You're born with a set of cards, and those cards are like who your family system is, where your location is, what your ethnicity is, all those kinds of things. And we can't change those. That's where we start. Now, what we do is really up to us because every single one of us are born with choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that people lose that. A lot of times they don't realize the power they have in how you play those cards too.
Well, and I also think that people forget there's more cards.
Yeah.
At any time you can go draw from the deck, so to speak.
When I was a young single mom, one of my favorite songs was "Remember the Gambler" by Kenny Rogers.
Know when to hold them, know when to hold them.
Know when to hold him, know when to play him, when to discard him, know when to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is so wise. I just really think that's a very wise message.
Well, and I think what you'll find, when we look at people even going with that gambling thing is they always think it's going to be the next card, not realizing it's their decision on whether they play that card or not. It's like the power that you have in making those choices.
Exactly. And every single one of us, even when I worked with the poorest of the poor people in Africa, every single person has a choice. Some of the choices really might suck, but we all have that power to choose. And sometimes we can't choose the event, but we certainly can choose how we react to the event.
Absolutely. In my practice, I always try to teach people that control is an illusion.
Right.
Because really the only thing we can control is what I think, what I feel, and how I respond to a situation. But we so much of the time give that to this external forces that really they don't have the power that we think they do. We give them power.
Right. You're so right, Sharon. That's so wise. I mean, it absolutely is spot on. The only choice we have is our behavior. I mean, that's the only choice we have is what we do with whatever it is.
Because when we look at your story, you started, it was a little rough.
Do you think that was a little rough? Not everybody starts with their mother thinking that you're possessed by the devil, and she spends your childhood trying to exorcise you. And that's just a little bizarre. It's a little out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that sets a foundation for really questioning worth, and it opens up this door to not some of the most positive self-talk in a way, or you use so much more self-talk to get out of the negativity. So either way, it's a job.
Exactly. I can remember my last name is Pappas. And I grew up calling myself Pappas US, because I didn't, why not? I mean, my self-worth really was not very, very good. I mean, but I found my worth in my doing, in my business, in my accomplishments. But it wasn't until later in life that I've been able to find my worth in my being who I am.
And sometimes that takes a lot of unlearning from
It does a lot of rewind.
Hmm. Well, and I think though, there's always been a little bit of that fighter in you, that little bit of that, at 17, wanting to do what you wanted to do. So it wasn't like you, well, maybe that's also that maybe being a little strong willed might have been mom's problem too, maybe. I don't know.
I think, uh, yeah, I happen to, and we certainly don't need to go there, but I happen to believe in reincarnation, and I know that I have been killed multiple times in multiple lives, and because I speak what I think,
Hmm.
and so there was something in me that I didn't really, I really didn't pay a lot of attention to the fact that my mother didn't find me acceptable. I just thought she was making a poor choice. That she was the one that had the problem, that it wasn't about me. And now that really is an extreme case of denial. And that's what I had to sort out in my 50s. But that's how I dealt with it,
It,
was that she was the one that wasn't seeing me clearly, but yet it really impacted how I felt about myself internally.
well, and I think oftentimes when we do that, when we think that then that solves our problem and absolves us in a way, but our part is that in some weird way we're buying into it in
Right.
in our choices, in those decisions that we make further down the line.
Exactly. And I think absolutely, Sharon, that the reason why I personally had a huge gap between my personal life and my professional life, they weren't integrated.
Okay.
They just weren't integrated. And I think in our generation, a lot of career business women have struggled with that. And that the fact that they're very capable and were able to do things, but when it comes then to that old programming that we learned as children,
Mm-hmm.
that's what really trips us up.
Oh, absolutely. And I,
Yeah.
and I think when you come from those backgrounds that are more rigid.
You're so politically correct. I love it.
Well, you grew up in that background.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't try to exercise me, but if I questioned anything, it was just, unheard of that you don't question your faith. And that was what it was. Explain, how is this? And, they had a hard time with that. So I guess I kind of just learned I kind of lost my voice. I became pretty quiet and just
Right.
reserved.
Right. And you really think about it. How many parents, when a little girl is sassing or talking back or not agreeing, most parents say, well, be good, be quiet, or what have you. That's terrible. It really is. I
Yeah.
mean,
Hmm.
you never hear anybody say, oh, yay, my kid just told me that I was all wrong. That really is good. If that little child is that discerning and is able to cognitively put it together why they don't agree with what that adult is saying, boy, that's phenomenal.
It
But
really is, but they don't see it as discerning. I know that for me, it was
oh,
the thing of, well, that's just the devil talking to you,
exactly,
making you.
exactly, exactly. Whereas, boys got a little more get out of jail free card. Oh, boys will be boys.
Mhm.
Well, we were supposed to be good.
Yeah.
Well, and I think even in that, there's this really good book called The Audacity to Be Queen.
Mhm.
And she talks about in there, when we silence women, we take away their intuition as well. And when we silence that intuition, that's why we continue to get put into these situations where the intuition is saying, oh, danger, danger. But everything else, that stuff that we learn, it becomes that driving force. So we will minimize the intuition and go with the status quo of what that upbringing looks like.
Exactly. It's all those darn supposed tos that get in the way.
Yeah.
And I learned early on, I just do not want anybody to define my supposed tos. I want to define my supposed tos.
That's why you were probably, let's talk a little bit about your business life because, you were an entrepreneur when a lot of women weren't doing some of the stuff you were doing. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, I definitely will. And let me start by saying one of my advantages was the fact that I had grown such tough skin to survive my childhood.
So thanks, mom and dad. No.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's taken a long time to kind of get to that point. But yes, because my business was I started it back in the mid 80s, selling software into manufacturing companies, into small manufacturing companies. And here I was, this young woman telling men how they should run their manufacturing business. And, that was a bit unusual career
Mm.
path, but it was successful. I was able to sell the business at 49. It's still running.
Nice.
Right.
But I'm sure that didn't sit well at first with a lot of the males in the.
Well, what was interesting, and I understood right in the beginning, was that I first started out as one of the first computer sales reps in the world, quite frankly. And I would end up, we had to start with making cold calls. And I would get a lot of appointments because the men wanted to see what this broad looked like. How dare she think that she could tell them what they should do?
Mhm.
So, of course, I would get the sales call. And when I walked in, I really knew my stuff. I really knew my stuff. And I learned how to deflect their advances and keep moving the sale along. So it was an advantage in that I was different.
Okay.
You
Well, it
know,
helps to be knowledgeable.
well, you do. I mean, you have to know what you're talking about.
Right.
And, but one of the things that we women really have is, like you were saying, that intuition.
Hmm.
And so if you can learn to trust yourself and learn to listen, to slow down, and to hear that voice, that's your wise woman within speaking.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We all have those kernels of wisdom that are just waiting to be nurtured.
Exactly.
Right. And I think people stay so busy most of the time, they're not sitting in that stillness or allowing them that time to even hear that.
Oh, I'll tell you, I have this really dear neighbor who I just adore, and she has such a busy mind. She has such a kind heart. But I gave her a challenge to find 5 minutes a day that she could sit. And I know 6 months later, she said, well, I think I'm at a minute now. I said, well, we're moving. We're moving.
Yeah.
And but it's hard. It is. So
Mhm.
now the challenge is up. I gave her my special little rocks that when I worked in Africa and I would just be so depleted of energy, I would sleep with these little rocks in my hand. And they'd energize me because they're grounding.
Mhm.
And so I gave Cheryl my rock and said, well, just at least hold this rock in your hand while you sleep. And we're coming along. It's fun.
That's such a fascinating thing because it's one of the things I do with clients is I have a box of rocks and I'll tell them to pick the rock that is theirs because it becomes theirs and to, whenever you're feeling anxious or whatever, touch the rock, feel it, be grounded with it so that it takes you out of that space. Do you know what I mean? And I think those are
Right.
things that
And
are important.
oh boy, totally, it is. I can remember when I first was learning how to unthaw my body because you get all of these arrows that you think you're deflecting. I mean, you're not made of Teflon,
Mhm.
things penetrate and you need to be able to get rid of it. And I'm a big fan of somatic therapy and unwinding that stored up energy and so forth. And I can remember in my early days of really concentrating therapy, trying to remember to wiggle my toes when I was in a stressful situation, because just focusing then on wiggling my toes, that took me out of that drama, that cyclone of drama, because I was thinking about wiggling my toes.
There are so many things that people can do to reset to that mindfulness if they would just do it.
Right,
You know what I mean? But it is so hard
right.
to get out of the chaos we're
It,
so conditioned to be in. And that was another fascinating thing about you. Then you go off to Africa and talk a little bit about that. What got you from that to Africa and doing the humanitarian stuff?
so here I retired and I failed. I mean, I didn't like retirement.
What didn't you like about retirement?
Well, my purpose really had been all, and my worth had been all wrapped into my doing. And here I had lived the American dream. I had started this business with no money, single mom, two little girls, third one on the way, and retired at 49. But it was just boring. For one thing, I found that I'm not a good follower. It was so disappointing. I didn't know how to follow.
Mhm.
I tried to volunteer and it would be like, well, geez, if they would just do it this way or do it that way, we could accomplish this or we could have this goal and that. I'll never forget when I got on the board. I even tried to learn to play golf, and that was not a good thing. I got on the board, and as soon as I got on the board of the golf club, I was talking to the rest of the board about what needed to be done to maximize their investment of the membership. And the guy would just sit there and say, lady, we're just here to play golf. And you know, I, I just, I didn't know how to turn it off. So in traveling, there was this moment when I'll never forget, it was a really hot, dry day out in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And the group I was with was walking off to the well at the oasis. And I remember I hung back a bit because I saw these little kids. And this little girl came up to me and she had flies on her face. And I thought, my God, that little girl could be my granddaughter, Ella. She was about the same age. And this little girl did nothing wrong to be born into this disease-ridden life. And my sweet Ella had done nothing special to be born into my family. And that moment, that absolute moment in time, set me on the next track. And that was, I being a bit delusional, not religiously delusional, but being a bit delusional. I thought, well, I could figure out how to get the flies off these kids' faces and give them a chance. So that became my next purpose in life, was to help these people that didn't have a chance to have more choices, have more opportunity.
And I love how you put that in the book about seeing things through a cultural lens. That was eye-opening for you. And I think that that is so true whenever we've traveled to different places, and that it just opens your mind just to see what other people are living with, how things are for them.
Especially if you don't stay in the fancy hotels and eat at the fancy restaurants. You need to get in there and walk the streets and see these people as people, because that's who they are.
Mhm.
And it's so enriching. I learned so much by living in Ethiopia. I learned so much from people that can't read or write. They're the ones that really help me embrace my wise woman within.
Okay.
And they taught me how to be.
What did you find with that when working with this group of people? What did you find were their strengths that you got to see and maybe walk away with a little bit of that for yourself?
I'll tell you, Sharon, one of the things that struck me early days in my work when I was doing surveys, and because I couldn't speak the language, I would be forced to sit on this feces encrusted hillside, waiting and hoping that the interpreter was asking the question I had asked him to ask.
Mm-hmm.
A half hour later, I would get back. No, they had not asked the right question. But during that time, I had the chance to observe. I was forced to observe. And watching them, watching the kindness they would show to each other, how the women would help each other with the babies, how collaborative they were. And I kept thinking, how am I going to introduce income generating activities in this area and not destroy their collaborative culture?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had made my money, made my mark by being a fierce competitor. And now I was going to try to help them make more money and not compete.
Okay.
And that was amazing. That really shifted. You talk about shifts, Christy, with, going through that cultural lens. All of a sudden it was like, whoa,
Right.
how do you do that? And then belief systems, having been brought up in a very religious home, boy, I was taught polygamy is horrible. It's absolutely like the devil's work magnified, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was working with polygamous cultures, and I came to understand how that saved the woman's life because her workload was too heavy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What she had to do was too much. Then the big problems really were that the young men didn't have anybody to marry because the elders were the ones that had the cows and sheeps and ammunition for their guns.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we had other issues. But every time I turned around, it was like, wow, that's amazing. This, whatever that belief was that I had, I think I better examine that because there's a different side to it that I had never considered.
Well, and I think that people don't understand in certain cultures and things like that. community means something very different. Community
Mm,
really means community. We take care of each other, whether it's in that nucleus of your family that creates a community, whether it's polygamy or whatever it is. It's a shared workload. It's
mhm.
shared parenting. There's so many different components to it. We look at polygamy so differently here, and once again, there's so many different belief systems around the world. And I think when we stop from that place of judgment and we stop and we actually sit and listen,
Mm.
it's amazing the things you can learn. Once again,
That's
it's
so
those
rich.
cultural components that I think we miss out on. And it's not one is better than the other.
Like,
We're not in competition.
I do think that it is hard to sometimes to wrap your mind around because you're seeing, like I remember reading in there in your book that about how poorly the women are treated in general. And it's eye-opening to see though how they function within that dysfunction, and like you're doing that collaboration and helping each other out.
Right. And one of the things that I really struggled with was for a number of years, I was so angry at the elders and at the men. I was just so angry because I was looking through the female lens and it was so unfair.
Mm.
The workload, I mean, so unfair. And then as I did more work and experienced more personal growth myself, I realized the men were just befuddled because what they knew how to do was what their ancestors did. And it worked for their ancestors. And here, their life, they hadn't done anything to change their life and make it different than the ancestors. But we in the Western world have done a hell of a lot that has impacted their life today. The men became disenfranchised. They lost their role
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't know what to do.
Mm.
And so we started helping with that.
Well, I think it's because we forget that throughout our lives, we're redefining who we are.
Right.
And if we don't, we stay in a stuck place and then we don't understand why we're never happy like we should be, or we're seeing the world in a negative space, whatever that is. It's understanding that as humans, there should be growth and development. We should be redefining who we are. But culturally, I think sometimes when you look historically, people do get stuck in their roles, very traditional roles. And then somebody's there like, but I don't want to do this. I've had men who say, I would really love to be a stay-at-home dad. That would be my idea. I want to raise the kids. I want to spend. But once again, it's, are you going to do what you're going to do? Or are you going to buy into the social construct?
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's on so many different levels we see it.
I think nature is just the most amazing teacher and can teach us just about anything that there is to learn. And if you take a look at a pond of water that has no fresh water going in and nothing other than evaporation going out, what happens to it? It starts getting pretty smelly
Mhm.
and yucky and scummy,
Pretty stagnant.
pretty stagnant. And that's what people do. I mean, if you just sit and you have nothing, no new inputs, and no source of energy that is causing movement, no cogitation at all. Yuck. I mean, it's not very fun to be around those people.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not, is it?
Mm-mm.
And I think that it's interesting to me how much of the time people don't know they're the pond that's not moving.
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Because they don't take responsibility.
we also become very complacent in the way in which we were prescribed something and that
Right.
we take it on as our own, even though it's not. Oh, this is my lot in life. I'll just do this.
Poor me.
Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or people will say, well, Lori, you're so lucky. Well, you know what? I am lucky. I'm really, really lucky. But I've also taken advantage of whatever thing came up that I thought might be a lucky opportunity and took the risk to turn that opportunity into luck.
Well, I think that you have to be open to possibility.
Right.
But that also means something new, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. You know, it means I have to move out of my comfort zone and take that risk.
Right. And not a lot of people like to be uncomfortable.
Right.
Oh, no.
No.
Hence,
But then
I can be a therapist forever.
job security, huh? Uh, I know. It is true. And it's so fun to learn. It's so fun to just experience new things. I mean, my God, I'm 76 years old and I'm at the highest learning time of my life.
You know, one of the things I like, because even early on, you were about learning,
Right.
reading, learning as much as you could. Do you feel like that was somehow that salvation for you growing up in that restrictive environment? Because I think learning takes you outside of that, at least for a moment.
Well, I think in that restricted environment, I think while I was under my mother's thumb, I think I escaped into reading. I think that fantasy world allowed me to live different roles. And that was my fantasy place. And so I lived there probably more fully than I was really in my environment so much. Because before I was put in the nut house, I had a photographic memory. So learning wasn't something that I don't think I really learned. I think I just had pictures in my mind of what it was I had read or whatever. And I had to start learning once when I was before I stopped swallowing those pills in the nut house as a way to get out, which people are going to just have to read about it to find all the details. But anyway, once I stopped swallowing those pills and managed to escape the nut house, my memory was gone. My photographic memory was gone. And so at 17 years old, I had to teach myself to learn.
Well, and I think sometimes maybe when you have the photographic or you're using it as an escape, it's not learning in the same way.
It's not learning.
You know?
It's not learning. It's just the fact that you've got this data, but you haven't really learned to absorb, to observe, to process. All you have are these pictures in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, when I would take a test, I could just flip to that page in my head and I'd read the answer off and write the answer down. But I didn't learn it.
Exactly.
And I didn't learn how to remember in a framework that was contextually rich. I got the opportunity to start learning how to do that because I had to start from zero when I was 17.
Isn't it amazing how we can look at something as traumatic as being put into a nut house,
Right,
that it was also a place where you learned that you weren't learning in a way.
right.
So you have to get out, and then it's like this whole new world in a way.
Exactly, Sharon. And that's what I try to communicate is that we're dealt these cards, but how we play them is up to us. And we can do just about anything. I mean, one of my biggest heroes in my life is Gulu Bola, and she's in my book.
Mhm.
I love her dearly. She's the wise woman of South Omo. And I met her. Gulu could not speak the language, the Mark language, which is the national language. She really couldn't count over 10. And she was the chairman of the Minagelti Women's Cooperative. But I could see her spirit. And we went through a whole adventure, and eventually I was able to start a school and teach the women how to read and how to count. And we installed a rural trading center because where she lived was 50 kilometers from the nearest market town. And the women would have to walk to get there. And we started this little rural trading center, and Gulu still runs it today.
Oh, awesome.
And they manage their money. They've got a grinding mill. And she started with really crappy cards. I mean, really, really crappy cards. And do you know, during COVID, I heard what she did was she walked around with holding my picture to her heart, crying because she was so afraid that I would get COVID and die. And here she was in this area with no food, very little water. But her concern was me living here with all this resource.
Mm, yeah.
But that's their heart. That's their heart.
Sound like amazing people.
Oh,
Amazing.
just incredible.
And I
Incredible.
think sometimes when we have adversity, adversity is not always a negative thing. Adversity can propel us to become that better version of who we want to be.
Exactly. I truly believe, and this is really what readers are telling me that have read the book. They have this aha moment where, yeah, I guess my struggles and challenges are the key to me finding my wisdom.
Mhm.
That having that struggle, having that challenge allows me and opens that portal so I can find my wisdom.
I think sometimes one of the things when I work with people with trauma and they come in and they'll say, I just can't get past my trauma. And I'm always going to say, but of course you have. That was
Yeah,
it. Like, what do you mean? I said, you're sitting in front of me. So the trauma didn't kill you.
right,
I said, you've gone through the trauma. I said, it's your thought that keeps the trauma alive.
right,
I said, so what do we do to change that? But it's not. And once you learn how empowering that is, wait a minute, I don't have to do this.
right.
There is such power in that. And there's so much power in being still, taking those times to learn, have that introspection. And it sounds like a lot of what you were doing was that introspection, looking at your life. Because I know you struggled even as a mother.
I did. I did. Like so many people, I didn't have a healthy role model. I had no clue what a healthy mother looked like.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. And I worked so hard to be super mom that I ended up being subpar mom. You know, I really did. I
So
had no clue.
So when you talk to your children about that today, do they view you as a subpar mom, or is that something you created in your head?
Oh no, they think I was a subpar mom.
Okay,
Yeah.
just want to make sure, just want the audience to know that we're in agreement here. They
Yeah,
say
I mean
that,
they know all the things that I did wrong and that they wish I had done better. And but you know what? Now that I've written the book and they've read the book, they understand. It doesn't mean that, and they have forgiven me, but that doesn't mean they've forgotten because we don't have to forget when we forgive. We just don't want to carry that emotional baggage anymore.
well, and I think the thing is that when we step away, and I think one of the biggest things we do when we're having relationships with people is truly to take that step away, or at least to learn about their journey. Because if I learn somebody's journey, I'm more apt to have empathy and to have an understanding than if I just sit there and pass the judgment of, well, she was just subpar. Well, why was she? But you're right. How many times we have parents, and I taught parenting class for years, and I always tell them the first thing, you have all done the best job you can with what you know.
Absolutely. And I did. I did absolutely the best job that I could do with what I know. And I have never done anything intentionally to harm anybody.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that's why I'm so thankful that I've been able to forgive myself. And that was very difficult to do because you so much want. I mean, more than anything, especially when you had a crappy mom, you so much want to be different and so much want to be that perfect, but you don't have the rule book. And back in our days, I mean, it wasn't like it is today where there's so much more available. So you do your best, and I always did my best.
And I think so much of the time when we look back on our history, I always tell people when you're looking back on your history, have gratitude for all of those moments, each place that you were in, because it still got you to where you are today.
Right.
And we've got to learn to enjoy the journey, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it.
That's why when I go through my dream model that I come to appreciate more and more all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Really helps me. And the A in dream is acknowledge and the fact that there are hardships. There are, and life can suck and things can be unfair and bad things can happen to good people. But we're human. That's the way it is. So we have to move on.
Well, and I think sometimes we perpetuate it in social constructs of we kind of keep people stuck in
Right.
ways, and I always ask people who benefits from you being in this state of mind,
Right.
and sometimes it is when we're looking at the past. Well, you're doing this because you're still angry with the parent who's not even here anymore. How is that working for you?
Right.
It's that, well, we're just supposed to because you're not supposed to. That's not an okay thing. Whatever it is.
Perfect example of the supposed to's.
Exactly.
I know one of my former stepdaughters said to me when she was little, she says, yeah, when you really are so angry at somebody else, it's like you're drinking the poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
And boy, you are so right. That's exactly right. Is only person you're hurting is yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it sounds like, as you've been on this journey, it's taken a minute, but it sounds like it's still been fulfilling in the way that you're where you are today.
Oh, I love where I am. And I have now embraced the fact that I'm a wisdom elder. I am. I've been able to access that wisdom. And my purpose now is to share and to help others access their wisdom.
Is that something that you thought that was just kind of grew organically for you, or was it something you said, well, I want to do this and now I'm going to move on to this? Or was it just more because of your own process that you're there? Well, I'm going to share this because I think it's relevant.
When I was in Ethiopia, I would come home at night exhausted. And instead of being able to read, the electricity would go out. And I was forced to think.
Hmm.
And sitting there in the dark, I would think about the different challenges and struggles. And I came to realize that those challenges and those struggles really were the key for me. And I was able to start harvesting that wisdom. And that's what readers are telling me. And I so much want to find the best ways to help people harvest their own wisdom. Go ahead, Christy. You look like you're ready to say something.
Oh no, well, I was gonna say, I think that one of the best ways that we do that is sharing those stories.
Right.
This is really, it's wonderful because it gives people that insight, even like you were saying about your children. They didn't know what you were thinking at that time, but at least they can read this and get some insight about that.
Right. Right. And our relationships have healed. I'm so grateful. The whole thing is, though, we need to be really clear on what is it that we need and we want. What is our desire?
Right.
What
and
is
then
our passion and purpose?
exactly. And then we need to reflect, what is it that we know? I mean, we all know a lot, but it's really important to separate what we know from all the noise, all those supposed tos, all that emotional baggage, all that crap. I mean, that programming and so forth. If we can separate that noise from what we know, then we're able to say, oh, it would really be good if I could learn this or learn that, and I could gain this skill or get this perspective. And then you keep in mind knowledge that you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Well,
We
I
all
think
do.
I think that's one of the things that we've loved about doing podcasts and having people on and sharing stories. And we had a woman on, love her, uh, her episode, it's Parissa. And so we have this, and her husband then listened to it, and he was really moved and touched because it was things that he said, I didn't even know.
Isn't
You know,
that something that cool?
Yeah. Even
so
after being together for like 20 some years, he's like, there were aspects that I heard from her that I just did not even realize. So,
Right.
yeah.
and it's only when we get to tell our story, when we have that venue to do it, whether it's in writing a book, The Magic of Yes, that we get to share that and people get to read it and say, oh my God, okay, what I'm doing, okay, I'm on the right path, or oh yeah, there is room for change. Whatever that is, it is through our storytelling. And I think when you work with people in different countries, a lot of their stuff is storytelling.
Right.
It's the story of the people, of what they do, that really resonate. They're not writing it down in a book oftentimes. They're talking about this and they're sharing knowledge.
Absolutely. And our wisdom is passed on through stories.
Yes.
Really what it is.
Mhm.
It's one of the things I love about the Native American culture is
Oh,
it's
yes.
very story based. A lot of the Latin culture too. We tell stories all the time, don't I?
Yes.
Can't help it. It's in my blood. But it's ways in which we experience things at a very different level.
Right. Because you're telling that story with emotion. The
Yes.
feeling, is so different than just reading something from the page.
Well, I think what's cool is not only did you learn the culture of these people in Ethiopia, but they got to learn you too.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things, I think it ended up really being a mistake. It certainly wasn't intended to be a mistake. Several of us thought that if we could get these female leaders to participate in the UN's permanent forum for Indigenous people, that that would give them a feeling that they weren't alone.
hmm
And we jumped through all kinds of hoops and managed to get them passports. And now here are women that, their hair is, they use a silly clay and some butter and they twist their hair. And so you've got that, and you've got, they wear goat skin, and their basic needs are really not met. And we managed to get them some clothes. And can you imagine them flying on an airplane? I mean, oh my God, they couldn't believe it. But they were such good sports.
Mm.
And had them at the UN, had them in Congress, because I needed to get some appropriation bills, language interpreted differently, so we could keep doing projects. And had them to my home at the time was in Minnesota. And one of the days they asked me, they said, well, Lori, so could you just send somebody over and make our world like that? And I said, no, I really don't think I could do that. But when they got home, they were really misfits. And one of them really was persecuted and really bad. The other one, Gulu, managed to survive a bit better and end up prospering a little more from it. And because it took a couple months before I could get back down to the field and work on attitude readjustment down there.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But I realized that we Westerners can really think we're doing good, but we're really not being as sensitive to what the long-term impact there might be with our interventions. And it's so important to learn to look at things through their eyes, but it's as difficult for me to look at the world through their eyes as it is for them to look at the world through my eyes.
Exactly. And sometimes you can have those experiences, and I mean, the cool thing is nothing can ever take away their experience.
Right.
You know,
And when we ask them about it now, what they say is, "Oh, it was a dream. I just look at it as a dream."
Mm.
well, I think it's cool that you were able to help navigate somebody's dream.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Sharon.
Those things are so important, and sometimes they're only moments, but that's okay. It's amazing how one moment can carry us.
It is, isn't it?
Mhm.
And we are so thrilled that you joined us and that you reached out to us. We will read the book. Those things are so important, and sharing your story hopefully inspires others who maybe don't feel like they can do it, but hopefully in listening to this, they say, yes, I can, even at a time when maybe a woman wasn't supposed to,
Right,
or whatever it is. I can break whatever barrier it is to
right. And
become who I'm supposed to be.
it really is the magic of yes.
Yeah.
Is it really is saying yes and instead of saying no but. It's yes and.
Yes.
Mm.
So wonderful, wonderful. And thank you so much.
Yes, and to our audience, this is the book we're talking about right here, The Magic of Yes, Embrace the Wise Woman Within. Lori Pappas, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you. I so enjoyed myself.
wonderful. And as always, you can find us at
twogirlsinapod.com, and you can subscribe. If you've heard something that you like in this episode, please reach out to us. We are always up for comments. We love that. And you can find us on Facebook, Two Girls in a Pod Life's Journey also, and YouTube, Adventures of Two Girls in a Pod Life's Journey.
So thank you. Listen, and we appreciate you always, and we will be back next week.
Also, Lori, is there any website or anything like that that you would like to bring up for the audience?
Well, absolutely. I would love to have people check out loripappas.com, and that's LORIPAPPAS.com. And if you would like to download a free dream, which is my model for finding that inner peace, finding what it is that you need, they're free. Just loripappas.com/dream.
Awesome. So see you guys some free stuff. Who doesn't like that? Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week.
Thank you.